Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our diagnostic training session today. If you have any questions throughout the session, if you're joining us on Zoom, just look at the top of the bottom of your screen. Wherever your Zoom controls are, you should see a little button that says Q&A. Click on that, type in your question, and I'll get to those at the end of the session. If you're watching along on YouTube, just leave a comment on the live chat. If you're watching after the fact, after it's live, just feel free to leave a comment, and I'll get to those as I can. So my name is Jason Gabrinas. I'm one of Snap-on's National Diagnostic Technical Trainers. Been in the training department the last 11 years or so, traveling around North America, helping techs and shop owners get the most out of their diagnostic equipment. Before I did that, it was a couple of years as a diagnostic sales rep at Snap-on, so I had about 30 different franchisees I worked with, as well as the shops that they serviced in order to help everyone get the most out of their diagnostic needs. Then before that, it was 8 years at Subaru, so worked at a dealership, and I guess over time became that default diag guy in the shop. So I always ended up with the drivability problems, the intermittent problems, the weird wiring problems that would show up on those cars. And that's really where I cut my diagnostic teeth, was trying to figure out all those weird head scratcher type cars that would come into my bed. And before that, a bunch of other miscellaneous wrenching jobs. Been a little over 25 years under hood experience for me. So our topic today is continuing our OEM specific training series we were doing this year, and we are talking about Honda today. So we'll talk about what makes them unique, what pitfalls you might run into in our tips from a tech section, and of course, we will start with history. I'm going to start back a little ways. Started back with Ichiro Honda, who began working as a mechanic tuning race cars back in the 20s and 30s. And in 1937, he began a company producing piston rings. And that didn't go so well. So I guess the quality at first was not very good. So he actually worked with Toyota, providing piston rings. And so he worked with them to develop better quality throughout World War II. And in 1946, he founded the Honda Technical Research Institute. So in the Honda Technical Research Institute, they began by producing motorized bicycles, not motorcycles, bicycles with motors on, right? Since that's the easiest way a lot of these companies we've seen get into motorcycles and such is motorized bicycles to start. They did end up producing their first complete motorcycle designed and built by them in 1949, and they actually became the largest motorcycle producer in the time by 1964. Now, as far as automobiles are concerned, they produced their first automobile in 1963. It was the T360 mini pickup truck shown here. A little later, they launched the Acura brand in 1986. And in 1991, they released the Acura NSX with a mid-engine V6. And that was the first production model with the VTEC system that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But Honda's pretty famous for that. They reached the 1 million US sales threshold in 1998. And now they produce hybrid, electric, and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, which we'll touch on a little bit later as well. So they are, of course, one of the larger manufacturers in the world, known for their quality and reliability. So that's just a quick little history lesson on where they started back a little pre-World War II. And then since then, obviously been growing. So let's look at top models by sales. So we took Honda and Acura together. And this is from the last 10 or so years, 2013 to 2023, so about a 10-year span. And we see the number one vehicle on there is the CR-V, followed closely behind by the Civic. And of course, the Accord Pilot Odyssey, HR-V, a lot of SUV and minivans with the Odyssey, right? And the HR-V is an SUV. Then our first Acura down here at almost 600,000 units, MDX and the RDX, and then the TLX down here, and then the Ridgeline pickups in there as well. And you can see it drops off pretty quickly. After the HR-V there, it drops down to a little over 500,000. So, still a good amount of production, 3.7 million units sold in 10 years. That's a pretty popular vehicle. So out of these top 10, we picked a few representative vehicles just to kind of see what makes them tick and how they work and what we can see out of them. So 2019 CR-V, that was kind of the high water mark for the CR-V in those 10-year span. So it is the 5th generation of the CR-V. They offered a 1.5 liter turbo and a 2.4 liter naturally aspirated engine. And they all come with CVT transmissions. 2017 Civic, number 2 top selling model on the list. And this was once again the high water mark there. So 10th generation of the Civic. The Civic's been around since the 70s. 1.5 liter and 2 liter naturally aspirated 4 cylinders. CVT transmission only. and it was based on what they call the Honda Global Platform. So this is one of the earliest iterations where they had globally, no matter where you'd buy a Civic in the world, the Civic's going to be a Civic. Just might be right-hand drive versus left-hand drive, but otherwise, it's going to be the same platform, the same chassis, and same engine, same transmission, etc. It is the second best-selling car in North America behind the Toyota Camry. So if you're going to look at a car, you got the Camry, you got the Civic, and Nissan's probably got one in there too. So always a high volume vehicles, which is very reliable. There's a lot of them. 2014 Acura MDX is the representative Acura I decided to throw on there, and that is the top selling Acura. It's at about a little over 500,000 units. And it is the third generation of the MDX. It was available only with the 3.5 liter NA engine, and it was only available with 6-speed automatic transmission as well. So it's pretty much, this is what you get. So if you want a V6, you're in luck because that's the only one you get. So yeah, those are our representative vehicles. We'll be digging in a little bit deeper a little later. Some common issues across the board, across the brand. We're going to see valve train issues, a lot of valve train issues related to the VTEC systems, because it's kind of unique the way Honda does variable valve timing, variable lift, and such. So they do have a fair share of problems when it comes to those systems. A lot of catalytic converters. And I think you might find that across many of the Asian brands, just because they try to run them so lean to meet their emission standards, that they might be burning out some cats. And a lot of EVAP issues, just like most manufacturers, you're going to get those EVAP issues out there, just because it's so stringent, I guess, the standards for that, right? Some common codes that we found with this. So this is based on scan tool users, Snap-on scan tool users. And we will see a lot of commonality between the engine. We really only have the 3.5 liter and the 2.4 liter engine, all fairly based on the same type of thing. And we see a fair year range here. But we'll see VPS stuck off. That is that is for the VTEC system. VTEC system malfunction, VPS stuck off again. Crank sensor circuits, so those are kind of related. Camshaft position sensors, those are kind of related to that as well. Then your CAT code there, number 2. And then 2 more CAT codes down here at the bottom. So you see a lot of valve train timing related codes available, and it's amazingly enough, the top one's on the Odyssey. And then we get the CRV a lot because, hey, that was a top seller, Cord and CRV. So there's your different codes that you're going to see. The main codes, it's going to be a lot tied to that. Not a ton of misfires. I mean, you're going to see them here and there, but not a ton of that like other manufacturers you might find. All in all, not really some weird stuff in there, unless you count the the VTEC stuff, which may be unusual if you're not used to working on Hondas and Acura. So when we have specific features that we'll talk about, and as I said, the way that Honda does this is fairly unique to them. A couple other manufacturers do it in a very similar way. But they have the VTEC system, which is for their variable valve timing and lift electronic control, is what that stands for. And the way this works is they have 3 lobes on the cam. So they got 2 intake valves, 2 exhaust valves on each cylinder, and they will ride on the rocker, right? So it's an overhead cam, and they'll push down on the rockers. Now, normally they're going to ride on these outside rockers, which is kind of a lower lift, less duration cam lobe, and you'll see that they're a little bit lower. And then we have a high lift cam lobe in the middle. So what happens is, based on the rockers, so you're going to have these primary outside roller rockers, and that's where the cams are going to sit on the rollers. And then there's going to be this medium rocker arm in the middle. It's going to be your high lift rocker arm there. And we have these pins. So the pins, when they're in normal lift, they will allow this to kind of free float, and it's not going to be affecting the valves in any way. It's just kind of sitting there riding on that high cam. And then when it's engaged, it pushes out, and then it locks all these together, so that it has to ride on that high middle cam. And that's how it works. It works all on oil pressure. So if your oil is low, oil consumption problem, oil leak problem, some other problem with maybe the oil control valve perhaps, you can run into issues with this system. So it really comes in when it's under a higher load, higher RPM situation. So this has a pressure switch on there and also has a solenoid that's pulse width modulated, and it'll open and close this solenoid to change where the oil goes through the different oil passages to go to the rocker arm system. So like I said, under normal operation, we'd call low cam. You're going to have this spring that pushes the pin across, those pins that I talked about before. And you notice how the brakes and the pins line up with the 3 rockers. So it's going to ride on those outer rockers, on those outer camshafts, on the lower lift situation there. And that's based on oil pressure, right? So the oil pressure just kind of sits, it's sitting there not doing anything. It's not pressing on this. The return spring is doing all the work, keeping this in that kind of neutral state. When it opens up, though, it's going to open the valve. It's going to lift the valve up, and it's going to cause oil to then flow through the valve over here, overcoming the pressure of that spring. And then it pushes these pins in to lock those 3 rockers in place. So now it's forced to ride on that higher cam there. You can see that. So that is how, in a nutshell, how VTEC works. I talk about it in a couple other videos as well, a little more in depth. But that's basically how it works. And it's been the same way since the 90s. They really haven't changed much about it. And probably a little bit of improvement here and there, but if it works, it works, right? Oil pressure controlled, pushes the pins in, does that. They also have variable valve timing with the cam sprockets and cam gears, and that works pretty much how other manufacturers do. So it's not really special to Honda, but the way VTEC is, and they were kind of the originator of that too, right? So that's how that works. So if you're working on the system, first thing you really need to check is oil pressure or oil level. Make sure you have good, clean oil that works. And it's up to the full level. Otherwise, because everything works on oil pressure. Variable valve timing, variable valve lift, all that stuff works on oil pressure. So if you don't have full oil, good quality oil, the oil pressure might be incorrect, and then you'll have trouble. They also do displacement on demand, but they do it a little bit differently than other manufacturers. So we have a 6-cylinder that can run in, they do this on the 4 cylinders as well, but this is on the 6 cylinders what they're going to show you. So we have the low lift mode and the high lift mode, which we just talked about on the VTEC system. And then it can also run on down to 3 cylinders, depending on how they configure the oil passages. So they can actually go through and they can turn off the rockers completely in there. So if we take a look here, they all have pins with the return springs, right? And that's what locks the rockers together. And this would be in 6-cylinder operation. So everything's just going to operate the way it should with the rockers and everything. Everything's locked together. The pins are locked in. But then when it wants to shut off cylinders, it can go down to 4-cylinder operation. So it'll turn off just the back cylinders with that. So you can see how the oil pressure goes in, overcomes the pins. And then the rockers are just sitting there in space. They don't even push down on the valves. They're just floating there, not pushing down on anything. And then if they wanted to go down to 3-cylinder operation, they'll shut down an entire bank. So you see the oil pressure overcoming the springs on all of these. And it just shuts down the front bank there. And then just the rear bank's going to be running on that engine in that time. And it's just different oil control valves, front and rear. And then it's just going to control it with solenoids, and then has pressure switches to monitor. Now we get to tips from a tech. So this is one of my favorite sections of this. And this was kind of my intent with developing these. You know, it's great to find out, you know, the history and how they work and some specific things about them. But where the rubber really meets the road is if I don't actually work on these cars very often or at all. Maybe I'm a Ford specialist and then a Honda runs, right? So I might not know these little gotchas that happen that everybody knows about. You know, if you work on the same vehicle day in and day out, eventually you're going to learn these little things that are very specific to that brand that no other manufacturer has this issue. Oh, by the way, when it is this issue, here's what it is. Okay. So this is one of my favorite sections of this, of these systems. So here's a big one. I've run into this myself as well. So I know it's definitely out there. And this is a symptom tip on the ABS system. So VSA, which is Vehicle Stability System. So techs in the field report VSA light will stay on, and it may have a code 84 stored as well after replacing the ABS of VSA modulator, clearing the stored DTCs, or after performing brake repairs. So after clearing stored DTCs is the key here, because if you do a full vehicle clear, just a code clear, that one button, the neutral memorization procedure must be completed after the modulator assembly is replaced, clearing codes or completing brake-related repairs that may have caused the light to stay on. So you want to make sure that you are clearing that or doing this neutral memorization procedure after the fact. And then it's actually outlined on the next screen. Starts performing a self-test when the key is switched to the on position. After the engine is started and the driver accelerates above 6 miles an hour, the ABS pump will cycle for about a second. Noise is reported as a buzz or a moan. After the self-test is completed, the ABS light will turn off. So once you clear the codes, you have to drive the vehicle in order to do that reset. On some vehicles, you can also find that there is an actual relearn procedure. It's not on all of them. Sometimes you just have to go in there and just do a code clear in the module itself to make that reset as well. But driving it in this case says it will fix the problem. And that's really it, because they're, like I said, they're fairly straightforward in how they're engineered, how they're designed, how you go and approach any of the issues. And they don't really have any of those weird off the wall issues that you really can't figure out using other methods. Right? So let's get into OEM specific functions. This is going to be scan tool related. So since VTEC is a big thing with them, so the VTEC test actually goes through an automated VTEC test and a VTC test, which is going to be related to that. And then we have the CKP pattern learning. Remember how we said we had a lot of cam and crank issues on the cars? So crank position pattern learning is important for misfire detection as well. As far as transmission related tests for the CVTs, we saw a lot of CVTs on those. There is a CVT learning value reset on the vehicle. It's used after replacing the TCM or the valve body. So you need to reset it, reset the relearning after the fact. Other tests that you'll find in there as well is brake pad maintenance mode. So of course, if we're doing brakes, the emergency brake needs to be put into maintenance mode in order to change the pads on the vehicle. And then under ADAS, static or dynamic camera aim. So we actually just added the dynamic camera aiming to the software with the latest update. But there is also a static relearn if you have the targets. So this allows you to do either way. So if you don't have the targets, you can do you can put in a dynamic mode and allow that to happen. So the multi-purpose camera unit must be re-aimed if the windshield is replaced, the camera unit is removed or replaced, or if an aiming error occurs. So this is the adaptive cruise control. So there's a couple different ways to do it. Like I said, there's a static with the targets, and then there's a dynamic driving it down the road. So in this case, now with the new software, you can do either. And then before we move on to live on the tool, I also want to talk about, this is fairly recent that they announced this. Actually, people's probably not even out yet. So Honda is going in a slightly different direction. Yeah, they have hybrids for sure. And I think they may have an EV or two. But what's coming out next year is going to be a CRV, which is an EFC EV. So this is a hybrid vehicle, a plug-in hybrid vehicle that runs on a fuel cell instead of gasoline. So it's a hydrogen fuel cell engine instead of a gasoline engine, but otherwise it's a plug-in hybrid. So you get kind of the best of all of those things, and I'm interested to see how this will work out because there is actually some infrastructure out there already for hydrogen because fuel cell vehicles have been around for quite some time. It's just they're not mass market, so to say. But this seems to be a good compromise because EVs have their issues. Obviously, full gasoline vehicles have their issues. Hybrids kind of an in-between, but they still have the issues of the gasoline. So if the fuel cell vehicles can prove out, then what's the only emissions on hydrogen? It's just water coming out the tailpipe. So you really don't have any of the bad stuff. So it gives you the best of the EV vehicles. I mean, yeah, best of an EV or hybrid, and then also the best of a fuel cell. So if they can get that at a mass market, proven out, that may be the way we're going to go. I really think full-on EVs, just the infrastructure isn't there. Full-on hybrids, like I said, they have kind of their issues as well. So this kind of gives us the best of both worlds, in my opinion. So if that can, really take off, it is their top-selling model. So we'll see how that goes. 2025 model year. And you may not know, but we've actually had support for fuel cell vehicles in the scan tool for a few years because we have this Honda Insight that's been around since, sorry, not the Insight. Back that up. The Clarity, Honda Clarity. So that's been around since, the mid-teens with that. So EPA estimated 69 city and 6 highway, 12 pounds of hydrogen, 37, all this stuff was 174 horsepower, 221 pound-feet of torque, and that's running on a hydrogen fuel cell. So it's been around. They've been testing this methodology, I guess you could say, for a while. So it's definitely been around. It's been out there. So let's go live on the tool, and that'll be the first thing we'll look at, the clarity, as to what do we cover with that. So 2017 Honda Clarity, they only made it for a few years. They discontinued it a couple years ago. It's kind of a test bed. They didn't sell a ton of them, but for the ones they did sell, it is available inside the scan tool. If you just go in the scanner, we'll be able to see a few things. So in this case, you'll see engine's not there because, well, it's a fuel cell. So we got ABS brakes and such. But if I come down to hybrid/electric vehicle, you'll see we got a fuel cell module. So codes and data, functional tests. We have a high voltage battery fan test, DT electric water pump test, cooling fan test. So a couple different tests that you can do there with the fuel cell, and then some adjustments. Coolant air bleeding. So whenever you fill the coolant on the vehicle, you got to air bleed it. So there's an air bleed procedure there with you. Let's look at some data. And you can see a fair amount of data, right? It's going to have anodes and cathodes, things for the battery, hydrogen injector, pressures, hydrogen pump speeds, tank pressures. So a good amount of data that you might need to diagnose problems with the vehicle. Now, as far as this is concerned, I'm not sure if we have guided component tests on that. Yeah, we don't, because there's really not a lot that we can do with the hydrogen with that. But as far as SureTrack, let's see if we have any data. I'm not 100% sure. I don't quite remember from last time I did this class. Yeah, 7 repairs. So there's not a ton of them out there. But a lot of people looking up batteries, HVAC stuff. It looks like some ADAS stuff there as well. So it's, underneath, around the fuel cell part, it's just a normal vehicle, right? They take the gas engine out, they put a fuel cell stuff. So not a lot of data on that, because I'm sure there's not a lot of them in shops, and they're probably going back to the dealer if they did, I would imagine. All right, let's look at our CRV. Once again, we'll go on the scanner, see what we can see. Now, because like many manufacturers, many of these high volume manufacturers, they share engines, they share transmissions, drivetrains. We're going to see a lot of similarities in between the different vehicles. So things like functional tests. It's going to be your bidirectional controls, things of that nature. Gotta wait 10 seconds to pull them up here, I guess. All right, so things like throttle control, fuel pump, VTC test I talked about, VTEC test that I talked about, automatic or manual transmission. So you can do a solenoid valve activation or an actual full-on VTEC test. I think this is going to error out because it's going to think my engine's running. Yeah. So it'll walk you through that, though. It's an automated test to test the VTEC system, the solenoids and such. You can also do injector tests as well. Freeze frame data actually integrated in with there too. So that's kind of what like Toyota does. So you can actually go into integrated freeze frame data. You hit the little film strip there and it'll give you freeze frame data as to what happened integrated into the vehicle specific side. Also special functions in there. This one makes me wait 5 seconds. All right, so we can see like crank pattern learning, idle stop counters, throttle position learning, replace ECM, which is going to be like a VIN read write, shipping mode, fuel alcohol content write data for flex fuel, stuff like that. All right, now let's go to SureTrack. And let's see what we can see. Just going to pick the first engine there, maybe different between them. All right, so on the 2.4 liter, 4,800 repairs, so that's not a terribly popular one. Let's change to a different engine here, 1.5. Yeah, 96,000 repairs. So obviously the 1.5 is a lot more popular. So as usual, it's 2019, so that's what, 5 years old. So wheels, brake pads, batteries, and stuff like that. That's generally gonna happen. Tire pressure monitor system, that seems like it might be a little high up on the list there. AC refrigerant, AC and op, TPMS light on. And then we see in the codes, we see a cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4 misfire, random misfire, evap system. So evap codes there again. What's this? Let's see, that's a chassis code. Let's see what that translates to. So that is, that would be more in OEM testing. So automatic transmission, functional abnormalities of VSA modulator. Okay, so that's the VSA code. Instead, if you clear codes, you might get that. Oil life resets, noise heard from brakes. Yeah, so fairly common stuff. Pretty straightforward there when it comes to the CRV. Let's pull up the Civic. And that's going to have a lot of the same tests and functions in the scanner, because it's going to be, like I said, a lot of similarities between the engines and the transmissions. Let's go into transmission on this one. Okay, so once again, integrated freeze frame, some functional tests. Okay, so in this case, on the simulator, it doesn't have it. Special functions, CVT learning value reset. So that is the learn, or after replacing the valve body, etc. It's going to just do the relearn, and then of course it thinks I'm driving, so it's not gonna it's gonna error out. And then as far as sure track information, you see between the different engines what we can get. So that's a 1.5 liter, 25,000 repairs. So wheels, brake rotors, AC refrigerant once again on this. Spark plugs, steering wheel position sensors, the number 3. Those other 2 are for the 54 is going to be that VTEC or the VSA. System 2 lean at idle. Turbocharger boost control. Oh, it's a turbocharged car. That's why. So boost control, and then a couple misfires there. Switch an engine here. 2 liter. It's probably going to be a little more common. Yeah, 116,000 repairs, so a lot more common on that one. 2 liter is definitely a more popular engine, so you'll see, same thing, AC, because that's not engine dependent. And then we got evap code number 1, and then a lot of misfires. But once again, the counts for codes aren't that high. For 116,000 repairs, very few occurrences of actual codes where they had them on repair orders. Input speed sensor, so that's on the transmission. AC and op is the number 1 common symptom. Now that's kind of interesting. A lot of noises. Transmission fluid is the number 1 thing up there, so fair number of repairs on that one. And then lastly, we'll pull up the Acura, see what we can see on that. That one's got the 3.5 liter, so that's going to be very similar. Let's go to engine. So we got special functions in here. So it's going to be, like I said, very similar. ECM reset, shipping mode release, crank pattern learn, crank pattern clear, idle stop counter clear, throttle position learning. So a lot of that same stuff that you were going to see in the CRV. And then if we go into sure track, and this only had 1 engine, right? So it should be, say it's all-wheel drive. All right, 58,000 repairs on that. And the number 1 code is throttle actuator. So that's actually the throttle motor on that. And then we have rocker arm actuators. So that's going to be related to the VTEC system. CAT codes on both sides. System 2 lean on both sides. A couple evap codes, a couple knock sensor codes. That's unusual as well. Number 1 is timing belt. Probably to do the timing belt on that, I'd imagine it's fairly tricky. A lot of cams to hold in place. Water pump, stuff looked up by folks. So let's see the throttle actuator. So like causes and fixes, what do we see for that? So if we have that code, it could be any of those things. But if I have these codes in common, it's going to be throttle body gasket together. Top repairs. So you clean the throttle body over replace the throttle body. So a lot of throttle body cleaning, and that solves the problem. So you don't have to actually replace it. All right. So that is Honda. Hopefully picked up a few tips and tricks. Like I said, it's fairly reliable as a brand. And you know that they've always had that reputation. So not a lot of weird off the wall failures. Except for that Acura seems kind of abnormally high on a couple of like the lean codes and stuff other compared to other Honda and Acura vehicles. So take that with what you can. With hopefully it picked up a few little nuggets, especially like that VSA reset. That's important because we get a lot of phone calls about that in the customer care center as well. So just keep that in mind whenever you do a code clear. That traction control ABS light might go on. Just got to drive the vehicle through the parking lot. Should be. All right, let's talk about what we're going to talk about next week. So next week, we are going to go with modern ABS systems, diagnosis, and repairs. We'll talk about some of your newer ABS systems, the magnetoresistive sensors that you might find on some of those, and some of the more active systems, and how it relates to ADAS. Because we think, oh, ABS back in the day was just to keep your wheels from locking up. Now it's way more than that. It's vehicle stability control, traction control, etc. So a lot of different interrelated things are involved with ABS. So we're going to talk about how they're all kind of tied together and how we might need to change the way we think about that a little bit. So join me as always every Tuesday, 6 and 9 Eastern. Go to snapon.com/OT if you want to join me on Zoom. If you want to join me on YouTube, it's youtube.com/snapon-diagnostics. And go make sure you like and subscribe to the channel as well, because we also offer, by the end of the year, it'll be over 100 free courses available for diagnostics training, anywhere from ADAS through cam and crank correlation and everything in between that you can see on the screen. It's all readily available for free, 24 hours a day. They're all about half hour, 40 minutes long. And you can watch them at your leisure. If you want to scan that QR code, it'll bring you to the page and subscribe you automatically. So definitely check that out. Now it's time for Q&A. If you did join a little late on Zoom and you're not sure how to ask a question, if you have a question, just find the Q&A button on the top or bottom of your screen and click on that and type them in. I see I got a couple here and I'll answer them in a second. If you're on YouTube, just feel free to use the chat and I'll answer them there. Also want to make sure I mentioned before we get to the questions about my buddy Keith, who also does free diagnostics training. His is scan tool related training. So on Wednesdays, it's Zeus and Zeus Plus. On Thursday, it's Apollo and Triton. And he goes through everything from soup to nuts, all the way from let's set up your Wi-Fi, let's talk about Security Link, let's talk about Altus Drive and the Snap-on Cloud, and everything in between. Plus, he goes through code to completion on Fast Track Intelligent Diagnostics and talks about how that'll help you. Doesn't matter what level of tech you are, it's going to help you save time on your diagnostic day. So check that out. 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central. It is Zoom only. It's designed to have the tool in front of you and just kind of walk along with what Keith's doing on the screen. Snapon.com/OT to sign up for. All right, so let's check questions. We'll go to Zoom. Okay. And John says, sorry, late, got held up at work, and internet's acting up, kicking you out. That's okay. You can always re-enter, and of course, you can always watch the replay on our YouTube channel as well. No worries there, John. Good deal. And Jay on Zoom says, thanks for the class. You're very, very welcome. Thanks for attending. We've been having wonderful attendance the last few weeks on Zoom. So hopefully we keep that up, and hopefully we can help you with your diagnostic dilemmas that are out there. And then as far as YouTube, Nick's checking in from the UK, as he always does every single week. It's a wonderful thing. Always glad to have you in class. I know it's very late over there, so hopefully you get stuff out of it. Sit down with a frosty beverage of your choice, perhaps, and get some diagnostic training. And then JLE Lobo says hi as light evening, and that is just fine. So with that, I would like to say thank you. Thank you very much for spending a little bit of time with me. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about Honda that you might not have known before. Hopefully you'll join me next week for modern ABS systems. With that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Have a nice night and take care.